Welcome to the Food Junkies podcast. Here, we aim to bring you the experience, strength, and hope of professionals working on the front lines in the field of food addiction. Our mission is to educate you, the listener, and increase overall awareness about food addiction as a recognized disorder. Here, we discuss all things recovery, exploring the many pathways people take towards abstinence in order to achieve a health-forward lifestyle. We hope to inspire you to thrive rather than just survive. So stay positive, make a change for yourself, and share your journey with others. And hopefully the message will spread.
Hey everyone, today we've got a truly pioneering guest. Dr. Ignacio Cuaranta, a board-certified clinical psychiatrist whose work bridges mental health, metabolic therapy, and lifestyle medicine. Originally trained at the Universidad Nacional de Rosario in Argentina. Oh, that's hard. Spanish is hard to wrap around my big smile. Dr. Cuaranta's journey has taken him beyond traditional psychiatry, from observing weight control programs in Michigan to intensive dietary management training in Canada. What sets him apart in his integrative approach, rather than relying solely on medication, Dr. Cuaranta explores how real food, low carb, healthy fat, and ketogenic nutrition, along with thoughtful attention to movement, rest, and stress, can support mental well-being, cognitive clarity, mood stabilization, and metabolic health. Welcome, Dr. Cuaranta.
Thank you very much for your introduction. It's really an honor and a pleasure to be sharing with you this episode. And thank you very much for having me.
Well, we are so excited. We first got to meet you. You and I have been working together a bit for, I would say, a year and a half at this point, like on World Health Organization and ICD work and consensus work, that kind of thing. But we got to meet in person in London and we got to hear your presentation. And Clarissa and I have just been so excited to have you on the podcast ever since we got to hear you speak. So let's jump right into it because we really want to expand on this topic. I, for one, felt like we did not get enough. So if you had the power to reset every listener's biological rhythms for 48 hours, be it light, food, movement, temperature, what single change would create the most significant psychiatric shift when they returned to their everyday life?
Well, that's a very good question. If I only have 48 hours, it would be hard to choose, but I would definitely standardize for their light exposure. This is the main sight giver or main synchronizer for our brain. Very bright natural light, especially in the first part of the morning, and very low light, of course, in the evening. The darkness at night is crucial too. That will be, from a physiological perspective, the primary synchronizer of the suprachiasmatic nuclei. So this is the main time giver for our brain in our body, and this would also help us set up the rhythm for melanopsin containing retinal ganglion in our brain, and these cells are especially sensitive to blue and rich light in the morning. So when they are stimulated, this is the primary stimuli to reset the central clock, shut down the melatonin, and help shape the cortisol awakening response. And this is something that in psychiatry we see very often among our patients, this dysrhythmia, And this is, from my perspective, if I had to only choose one, and as a very, very, very hard choice, morning light being a strong and consistent exposure, you get a more synchronized cortisol curve, and this better timing of other things like insulin sensitivity, more predictable with time, more predictable hunger signals, and of course also a less hyperreactive amygdala, which is also something that we deal a lot in psychiatry and in medicine in general, chronic stress. So that would be my choice.
Okay, that makes so much sense. And I'm glad I'm already doing it. So I feel like number one thing for mental health, yay, already doing that well so far. I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit more about the ultra processed foods. So if ultra processed foods hijack our reward system biologically, at what time of day are people most neurologically vulnerable to losing control? And why doesn't the field talk about that at all?
Well, in biological terms, most people are most vulnerable in the late afternoon and evening. And since I practice in Argentina, I have patients in other places in the world. And when I get to speak at conferences with other peers and patients, this is very consistent worldwide, I would say. And again, eating late at night. So by mid-late afternoon, there is often a combination of circadian and homeostatic factors. So we have some systems that promote vigilance. And in that regard, in our brain, these are naturally dipping. Glucose regulation is more fragile at that time of day. And there's also a concept coined by Roy Boymaster of ego depletion, is the fatigue of our volitive machine, let's say our motivation and how our volitions, how we can use our prefrontal cortex to regulate hunger and other emotions. So at the same time, many people are running on a mix of caffeine, irregular eating patterns, and this creates unnecessary oscillations in insulin, ghrelin, GLP-1, other hormones and neurotransmitters that intensify the reward hunger. It will be, okay, I had a very stressful day, and ultra processed foods are waiting for me at the end of the day. And these are specifically engineered, as we saw in London, and we've been working with this consensus group. These are engineered for rapid absorption. You know, the exquisite mixture of fat, sugar, and other processed chemicals really produce a very fast striatal dopamine spike and a very strong opioid response. So it's very hard for patients that maybe had the chance to stop or quit smoking or quit marijuana. They have a harder time quitting ultra-processed food consumption. So when you combine that with this fatigued prefrontal cortex and a highly sensitive and sensitized amygdala, the inhibitory circuits that need to be right on and ready to act are at their weakest, and the reward salience that would be how much a substance attracts us and how willing we are to consume them is at its highest. So with that combination, it makes it very hard to not eat late at night, and when circadian sleep pressure starts to rise and is high, but people are still on screens, disrupting the axis and under artificial lights, melatonin is suppressed, and these wake-promoting systems are unstable. So this generates a very vulnerable window of opportunity where, ultra-processed foods we are much more vulnerable to eat them. So, and the other thing is that I think that we rarely talk about this, and speaking in psychiatry and in mental health fields, is that we usually don't collect timestamp data. We don't collect what patients are doing in their everyday life, especially in regards to food consumption. Food diaries and diagnostic interviews usually focus on what and how much we are eating, counting calories. And I think that this is one of the most harmful effects of the psycho strategies, calories in, calories out, where quality has been left out. When in circadian time, usually RCTs typically treat time of day as noise rather than as a key variable or a signal. So this is why I focus on chronobiology and using TRE, time-restricted eating opportunities as something very important in psychiatry, as a very important opportunity to intervene, and also as a screening tool in psychiatry. And sadly has not been fully integrated in our practice.
Yeah, we're going to talk about time-restricted eating here in a little bit, hopefully. But Everything you're saying is so good. It's so interesting. Like we talk to our clients about, of course you're hitting the wall, come the afternoon. Of course, that's when you're the most vulnerable. Your willpower is depleted. You have decision fatigue. Oftentimes I put it in terms of like relationship and, individual output as far as like stressors, that kind of thing. But you're also saying, listen, we're setting ourselves up biologically as well to kind of hit the wall in the afternoon if we're drinking copious amounts of caffeine, if we're not getting the morning light in our eyes, so there are like biological factors, it sounds like, that we could be paying attention to that would set us up for success later on in the day and not hit that wall. Am I understanding that correctly?
You're understanding it exactly. I mean, of course, as a psychiatrist, I don't want to fall into another harmful reductionism of saying, okay, it's only food, it's only light, it's only movement, it's only social life, it's only stress, it's only the time of day where you go to sleep or when you eat. But it's a holistic approach where you consider all of these aspects, also considering the chronotype of your specific patients. I mean, if you have a late night owl, usually those patients, we could find an eating window that suits them according to their chronotype. But if you have an early riser, there might be another window of opportunity to intervene. So, the clinical aspect should not leave the room. It should be in the room.
Totally. And speaking of early risers, right? We often, I feel like as a mental health professional, I end up talking to people like who have a hard time getting out of bed, right? Like the sluggish, the depression, whatever it might be. But then we do have those early risers. We have those people that are out of bed at Clarissa, I know, 4:30 in the morning, where they have that opposite. They're the early morning risers. They have that cortisol, bam, in the morning explosion. They're very productive, and then they have the crash in the afternoon. What's kind of your take on that rhythm?
Well, I see that especially with the people on the 5 a.m. club, and according to Robin Sharma's book of the 5 a.m. club, which of course it could be, you can be very productive. But I see that pattern sometimes as kind of a hyper aroused early chronotype. So people that are conscientious enough, they want to wake up early, they want to beat the day. And this is often rooted in a sensitized response of the HPA axis, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. So this is a constant stress that could be very well channeled into productive mornings and productive days. But instead of the cortisol peak occurring around normal wake time and gently declining, sometimes these individuals have a very exaggerated cortisol rise, often accompanied by a high sympathetic tone, made worse by more caffeine, and elevated norepinephrine, increased heart rate, and muscle tension. And this is something very, very difficult to have in the clinical realm. You have to intervene very slowly and progressively. But subjectively, it feels like waking up on fire. These people wake up with a sharp, laser-focused productivity window. The problem is that, this early surge is not supported by a healthy sleep architecture sometimes. And often it's limited or truncated, the architecture of their sleeping habits, the REM sleep. And this fragmented deep sleep and high nocturnal arousal load, it generates they fall short in the afternoon. So this cellular energy system, it's all of what happens inside the dance of the cell, the mitochondrial ATP production, the glucose uptakes in the prefrontal cortex that will keep that control going. Those are depleted. So this person usually experiences that mental fatigue in the afternoon, that crash that you mentioned, the emotional, lability. This is something that is very noted among patients. They say they feel more labile emotionally. It's like they snap until the minor frustration or uncertainty. Sometimes a kind of existential crash, but feels like people might interpret it as some type of depression, but it's heavily rhythm driven. This is why one of the crucial aspects why I say that we are living with anxiogenic rhythms, depressogenic rhythms, and obesogenic rhythms. We are embarking on these types of rhythms that affect us deeply. So clinically, my work and my aim in my work is to reduce this chronic hypervigilance that we often see, especially in the high achievers, and improving the regularity of the sleep window. That's essential. Reducing the late night light stimulation, and that's very hard because most people take that as a reward. I do it myself. When you finally can close the day and enjoy yourself, you want to watch some Netflix or something on the TV, or maybe start answering or scrolling on social media. That is very hard to as a clinician to say, okay, but let's think on the next morning and how we can better do a de-acceleration of your night. So improving the regularity of the sleeping window, reducing those harmful light at night, that stimulation, that usually helps a lot stabilizing blood sugar with adequate protein and real food earlier in the day. That also helps in the curve at night. And this, when the HPA becomes less spiky and less bumpy, the productivity becomes more sustainable. You can be more strategic about your day, and the afternoon crashes tend to dishabituate in your bodily rhythms.
So somebody who falls asleep to a television program and who maybe doesn't eat until 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock in the day, maybe that's contributing to the spike and crash?
Absolutely.
Did I just call you out, Clarissa?
Just so you know, Molly is calling me out right now.
Oh! I didn't know. I didn't want to be in the middle. It could be other conditions.
So I'm curious, just because I do feel so seen, and I can actually say that everything that you are talking about, leaning into regulation, not going and usually I used to do high intensity workout, I can set the alarm for 7, but no matter what, I wake up wide awake at 5 a.m. and I could see it in my CGM, blood sugar as well, a crazy morning spike. And so doing nature, outside light early in the morning, and instead of diving into the high intensity workout, really focusing on regulation during the day, eating stabilizing proteins, everything that you're saying has really reduced that afternoon crash. I'm wondering, as a harm reduction technique, would something like wearing, blue blocking glasses, would that be something that would be a good way to reduce the evening light? Or do you have an opinion on them in general? Are they helpful or are they not?
I usually both use them myself. I have the 3 colors of blue blockers. I think that the evidence is very conclusive in the use to, as I love the word that you use, to mitigate the effects. Of course, we have multifaceted benefits in, okay, if we can have darker nights, if we can have brighter days, we can expose to natural lights, sun, especially early in the morning, and when the sun is falling. It's when those special mix of blue and orange and purplish colors of the sunset. All those help to mitigate some of the effects of later LED exposure or exposure at night. But you can also use other methods to mitigate. If you are going to be awake for a couple more hours when your biological night sets up, you can use blue blockers to be inside. You can reduce the intensity of the lights. You can use more warmer, you call them warmer lights, right?
Yeah.
Cold and warm, okay? And usually trying to reduce the lighting coming from the ceilings and try to focus lights like a desk light, focusing on what you're reading or where you're working or where your steps are. So I think that all of those strategies can deeply help mitigate some of the adverse effects of staying awake later at night. But something else, when you go to a rural area or when you're on vacation and you are more exposed to your natural rhythms and you are exposed, maybe you go to a place where there's no such a tragic light pollution, you will notice that you will naturally will fall to sleep earlier in the day. You will feel more fatigued, but in a natural sense, it's like, I'd love to go to bed now, and maybe it's 2 or 3 hours earlier than your usual rhythms. So that, I think, also should tell you something.
Yeah, well, I live in the woods and I go to bed at 7:30 p.m. and I do not apologize for that.
No, please don't. It's magical.
It is magical. So we have clients that really struggle with winter, and we know that circadian biology also shifts dramatically during then. Should eating rhythms shift too? Should we be having earlier dinners, later breakfasts, maybe smaller windows of time restricted eating? Or do you think it's better to kind of stay that year round consistency that will help protect mental health?
I love that question. I once spoke with a guy from Iceland. They have 23 hours of light a day, and using meal timing as a zeit giver, as a signal giver, is essential for them to keep sanity. But also, even though consistency is crucial, in winter the photoperiod shortens, so our brain receives less total light during the day, and melatonin secretion tends to lengthen. And many people experience a shift towards more inertia, lower spontaneous activity. Some people call it the winter blues sometimes if this gets clinical impact, and sometimes increased appetite for carbohydrate-rich foods. So our peripheral clocks in the gut, the liver, the adipose tissue are sensitive to both light and feeding schedule. So historically, as a basis, humans would have eaten more in alignment with daylight, with longer overnight fast during long winter nights. But in principle, I think that gently shifting eating rhythms in winter, slightly, like you said, slightly earlier dinners, avoiding very late caloric intake, especially junk foods, perhaps allowing a bit later first meal also, especially if sleep duration increases. So this can enhance our alignment between feeding, insulin sensitivity, and the melatonin profile. So, for modern patients that are already metabolically and psychiatrically or psychologically unstable, frequent changes in schedules increase unpredictability and stress. So even though consistency is crucial, if you get the room to wiggle a little bit and go for earlier, I usually show my patients, the climate app in the weather app in the iPhone, and it will show you a beautiful light during the day. So you will have a natural curve. I usually tell them, try to tend toward this, since it's minutes after during winter, it shortens during the fall. Minutes by minutes as time goes by. I think that it's nice to have that into consideration and add it to your to-do list if you are prone to correct and align these patterns. But consistency is one of the main elements too. So whatever suits you.
Yeah, it's so interesting that we're talking about this, because obviously nutritional psychiatry is really kind of like exploding now. We're having more understanding about the things that we put into our body, and not only the things that we are putting into our body, but when we're putting them into our body can really impact our mental health. And so talking about rhythms and these smaller windows, in the wintertime, that kind of thing. Do you believe that time restricted eating is, superior for psychiatric health? And how do you reconcile that with a large population that feels more stable if they skip breakfast? So, is there like a better way to do it? Eat breakfast, skip dinner, skip breakfast, eat dinner. So like, which way is better when we are talking about psychiatric health?
Well, again, individuality in my clinical practice, when you are in the clinical trenches, like I like to say, where perfect is the enemy of good, I usually have deep into consideration subjective preferences. Of course, you have people that are willing to change everything and they are willing to go all in. But from a physiological standpoint, there are strong arguments for early TRE, early time restricted eating. insulin sensitivity is higher in the morning, the circadian pattern of digestive enzymes and gut motility is more active during the earlier part of the day, and melatonin, which also, one of the functions is impairs the insulin secretion, is low. So eating more of the big load of calories earlier and avoiding upfront, avoiding large meals in the late evenings tends to improve glycemic control, reduce nocturnal reflux, and improve sleep quality overall. All of which are beneficial for someone looking to stabilize their mood, for example. However, people's, as I was saying at the beginning, people's subjective experiences matter. And some individuals report feeling mentally more stable when they skip breakfast. And this, in Argentina, in Latin America, this is usually the case for people that sometimes we have a wider eating windows, and often they are coming from a pattern of very high sugar, low protein mornings meal that cause very rapid glycemic swings. So simply removing that chaos, organizing and giving them more order, relying on catecholamines and caffeine can feel like clarity at first. It's deeply liberating for most patients. Others, can have some underlying GI issues with the extended, with skipping the first meal, or some morning nausea, or some symptoms of the keto flu in the morning, like lightheadedness, or if depending on their the history of the patient. Usually, you can walk around having these things into consideration, especially if there's some history of emotion regulation with eating, or emotional compensation. Withdrawing from foods and making people feel more in control. So what I usually recommend is not being compensating with skipping meals for whatever meal you previously have. So summing up, clinically, I view early TRE as a very powerful option for those who can skip the latest meal of the day for reasons that we spoke before. But this is not dogmatic. I usually invite my patients and people in general to experiment shifting their largest meal earlier and not eating close to bedtime, having at least 2 to 3 hours of margin for your digestive system for the first part of the processing of your food. So while ensuring the food quality early in the day and monitoring mood, anxiety, how you feel around food, I usually propose this as an exploratory process and an exploratory endeavor, and start working from there. So usually it's ordering the chaos with a more clear, with a more anti-seismic structure as I propose it.
Oh, I love that. That feels really empowering, actually, to hear that. So we have a lot of listeners who are just in the early stages of giving up ultra-processed foods. They may have been using them for years, and they, lots of late nights, lots of stress, eating, maybe some ultra-processed food binges. What is your single most favorite 24 to 48 hour reset protocol that can help these individuals restore mental clarity fast?
Well, that's a very nice question, a very thoughtful question, actually, because sometimes people need something intensive, something that that will make change in the short term to make a before and after in their lives. And when you get that chance, I would say that my favorite reset, so to speak, is essentially a short, very intensive return to biological basics. So prioritizing the early regular bedtime is essential, is a fundamental, and a fixed wake time. Sometimes I tell them you might struggle for the first couple of days because you are habituating to a new schedule, but this is a reset. So with immediate morning light exposure to re-anchor the CSN, the SCN, so the suprachiasmatic nuclei. It's a núcleo suprachiasmático in Spanish. So when I have to say it in English, it's a salad word for me. So that I'm making my best effort. So that improves, the cortisol awakening response and begins to restore the normal amplitude. This is very important concept of the circadian rhythm. So we pair this with 3 simple whole foods meal, rich in protein, healthy fats, and low glycemic vegetables at will. So no grazing, no UPFs, no ultra-processed foods, no alcohol. Trying to reduce your caffeine intake. You might seen, for those who are watching, that I drink mate. Mate is being popularized by Andrew Huberman right now and other rock stars, but in cans. We drink caffeine in a more sustainable way. It's not like a huge shock of caffeine in the short term, but it can walk you through a slow release of caffeine. So it's 2 p.m. here, so this will be probably my last cup of mate. So reducing this stabilization of blood sugar, this reducing these large insulin spikes, counts the rapid dopamine surges, very important in psychiatry and in mental health, that are associated with the UPF's response. So also building a clear overnight fasting window, usually 12 to 14, gives a lot of order. And this allows migrating something called the motor complex in the gut. It improves the gut functioning. And also there are some studies that show that it could improve the gut microbiota. So supporting bile flow, promoting a more favorable pattern of microbiota metabolism. So, and on the flip side, to round it up, we will have to drop the evening screen exposure, allowing core body temperature to fall naturally, and give the lymphatic system a chance to clear the metabolic waste from our brains. And this is another usually less discussed topic in mental health. The function of the lymphatic system in cleaning up our brains of waste and metabolites. So usually what I see with this is fewer intense cravings and more stable mood, not because we've done anything exotic, as you've seen, but because we've removed several major sources of physiological noise that are generating these erratic patterns of behaviors that we are seeing in our patients.
Yeah. And I think that's what I really love about, your take on this. First, I want to say your English is way better than my Spanish is. So please don't ever apologize for that. Secondly, I really love this holistic approach that you take, that you really like to see the patient in front of you as their individual experiences and biological factors and resources. And so your answers really reflect that, to just give us a lot of consideration for how to help somebody get back on track quickly or to reset themselves and get themselves on the path. And so we're going to take a bit of a shift. Let's talk a little bit about, there's been a big push lately. I feel like maybe I'm behind the 8 ball on this, but I feel like I see more and more people using saunas for longevity. And we're kind of wondering, what is the chronobiological argument for it? And does heat from the sauna or whatever as an environmental cue have an ideal timing? And does that timing flip depending on the season that we're in? Talk to us about heat and saunas.
Well, the temperature, that's another core topic in mental health. Is not as crucial as a side giver as day and night and activity and rest. But for instance, a sauna use and other forms of heat exposure influence at multiple levels. They raise core body temperature, increase heart rate and cardiac output, activate heat shock proteins, and often increase circulating endorphins. So it makes us feel better, and norepinephrine. It makes us feel better, but also more active too. So the acute phase is physiologically similar to moderate intensive exercise. Moderate intensive exercise, like as a light run or a bike, but with a sympathetic activation also, and sweating as something that will help you clean your body and detoxify. So the recovery phase involves the parasympathetic, and this is the calming effect, shifting to a more gradual drop in core temperature. And for the brain, this combination can, in fact, enhance vascular function, which is optimal for a good night's sleep and to improve our circadian rhythm. But neurotrophic factors like BDNF and this sense of relaxation after heat stress. So as I was saying, this it is a side giver that we could use. Temperature is weaker than light, but still relevant. So our body expects higher core temperatures during the day, and this is a crucial concept here, and a decline at night. That's why we usually suggest to have our rooms colder than the rest of the house to promote a better night's sleep. So if we place a sauna in the late afternoon or early evening, several hours before bedtime, like with a good margin, the post-sauna cooling phase can reinforce that evening temperature drop, which is what your brain will interpret as a sleep initiation, and that's the trick. So if we do it very late at night, the stimulus may delay sleep because your core temperature is heating up, is rising. But if we do it in the early morning, it acts more like a stimulant, pairing with the cortisol rise. So also you ask about seasons, especially for those that have very sharp changes of season. In summer versus winter, the same logic applies, but context changes. In colder climates, the contrast between sauna and ambient temperature can be greater, and dehydration risk needs attention, and this is something that every sauna user will know, and anyone looking to initiate their practice and using sauna should bear in mind hydration. So I don't think that the ideal timing flips very strongly by season. Rather, I try to align heat exposure to that of the recovery curve and how this can support either your daytime alertness or evening relaxation, depending on your needs, what you're looking for in the sauna or in the heat exposure. But also, this is as a bonus point to say, this is one of the reasons why alcohol impairs sleep. You might fall asleep faster, but since your body temperature will increase a couple degrees, this will impair your rest, and it also will dehydrate you. So that's a 1-2 punch, very difficult for the body.
I'm wondering if you would be able to comment. I definitely have clients who struggle with seasonal affective disorder. And, these would also typically be my clients and me who wake up really early. And then the winter, we're not waking up to sunshine anymore. It's dark for like an hour and a half, 2 hours before maybe we could go outside. So I'm wondering, what is your take on people who use seasonal affective disorder lights? Is it something you encourage in your practice? Does it, is it beneficial for the chronological light exposure, or is it something that might interrupt it in a negative way?
I definitely don't think that I'm cautious of using the word definitely, but I don't think it will disrupt it will be something with adverse effects if you use it wisely. And I think that especially in countries where winters are harsh and days are very, very, very short, you get it. And when it's daylight, you will have a very covered skies with very low light exposure. I think in those conditions, red light therapy could be of very good use. I have to disclose that I do not prescribe or use much of red light therapy, even though what I just said, because most of my patients reside here in Argentina, and we don't have much access yet to that. So it's kind of like this accessibility issue for me. So I use other strategies as in my main practice. But I do think that there's a place for the use of red light therapy. I don't think that they will obstruct any other benefit. So especially for those prone to seasonal mood impact, I think that there's no harm in introducing them, and of course being consistent and pairing them with other habits. I mean, it's not the end all be all of a therapeutic chronological intervention, but considering our chronobiology. But I think that there's definitely a place for it.
Yeah, right. I live in Clarissa too. We live in the north. It's about to be summer for you, where you and we're about to hit some pretty significant winter weather. So it's always good to have different strategies because I struggle. Clarissa loves it. She lives in Canada. I live in Montana. I hate it so much. It gets colder where I live than it does where Clarissa lives. So I struggle. So I love these tips. Thank you so much.
Where in Canada? I used to live in Michigan back in 2001 and 2006. I lived for a year and a half in Michigan.
Yeah, so I am in Ontario, just like 2 hours north of Toronto.
Okay, great. Well, Ontario is the province or the state in Canada that I most visited because I was very near Detroit, so it's only a bridge away.
Yeah, exactly. And so, and I think a fairly similar climate as well. So we do get lots of snow and we get it does get dark for a lot of it. And we just hibernate, like bears. For the most part, you stop seeing people around as much in town.
And that is very important because it's having some intellectual endeavors, having that into consideration. We shouldn't be the same all year long. The seasons of life, it's like save yourself for the very intellectual, intense activities during those months. Of course, considering the context, but also it's like the seasons of life, as I like to say. But I do acknowledge that it can get hard. I mean, during those months, especially for me, that I wasn't accustomed to those harsh winters. Having snow until the level of the knee was an experience. The first couple of weeks was amazing, and after that was a challenge.
Well, I've lived in Montana and Wyoming my entire life, and it's still a challenge at 42 years old. So I don't blame you. And technically, I'm further north than Clarissa even is where I live. So yeah, it is good to have those seasons. I agree. And when basically you're in solitary confinement because you can't leave your house because it will literally kill you because it's so cold. I don't know how people can do it, but they do. And yet I do every year. So I love these. I love your input on this because it's stuff that I can try. So I know we're winding down. We're running out of time. And, for me, I'm really curious to know, if we lost power and we didn't have the artificial light and we didn't have screens, maybe we didn't have access to saunas or red light or any of these things. What psychiatric symptoms would decrease the most rapidly? What would we see improve the most in ourselves, in our clients, in people in general?
Definitely. One of the silent killers of our age is insomnia. And that would be I think that if we suddenly remove the energy, artificial light and screens for a month, I think we would see rapid changes in insomnia, late night anxiety, which is a normal time where people are winding down, mingling together, having deep conversations, making use of a handsome solitude we are so deprived nowadays. Digital driven attentional fragmentation is in my practice. I not only talk about food or food schedules and sleeping patterns, but also digital use and abuse. Digital fragmentation affecting our attention. So without this blue enriched light at night, our melatonin secretion would slowly start to rise earlier in the day and more robustly, and the equilibrium, the balance, the homeostatic sleep drive would no longer be overruled, by constant stimulation and stimuli. So bedtime would naturally drift earlier, sleep duration would increase for many people, I think, and crucially, our sleep architecture would likely deepen with more slow wave and more REM sleep. So at the same time, I think that this continuum, as I was saying before, the continuous bombardment of social comparison, news, alerts, social media, emotion. If one is feeling socially deprived, and you are isolated because of climatic reasons, for example, or for it's also if we have the power grid on, we start connecting. If we didn't have that chance, which is a benefit, it's a privilege, we have that chance to connect, but without it, it would reduce the chronic sympathetic activation and this amygdala overactivation and hijacking. So we could still carry, our histories, vulnerabilities, and go about our moods and our depressions. We can further go down into our emotions and what's happening to us without the external amplifiers of hyperarousal and rumination. They will be deeply reduced. So I think that there would also be less 24/7 availability. We can rest. You can detach a little earlier from work, and of course from ultra processed foods, and less food advertising. This is very important because we see food advertising and invitations and then tantalizing all the time, and I think we could relatively see a quick drop in symptoms like insomnia, irritability, overstimulation, and what most people describe as ADHD-like symptoms, the scattered attention and underlying conditions that we need to be more consistent in identifying our clinical practice as well.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, for the last hour almost, would you say that sleep, if we could honor I'm thinking about listeners who are like, oh, this is a lot. I don't know if I should give up food or if I should, start getting in the sauna or if I should be, sitting in front of a red light. Would you say that sleep would have the biggest psychiatric payoff if somebody was going to start today and they wanted to do something small, just start somewhere? Would sleep be it? Would that be the focus that you would encourage somebody to put their energy toward? Would be getting more rest, getting more sleep?
100%. I think that I would choose a stable sleep-wake schedule. Also, identifying that sleep is not something. It's something we activate at night. It's like a state of consciousness that we go through at night, usually, or in a nap, in a siesta. But it's something that we build up according to what we do during the day. So this stable sleep-wake rhythm that anchored in a morning light, meaning waking at the same time every day or about 20 to 30 minutes difference within days, including weekends. And this is something very important. Enter social jet lag, the difference of more than 2 or 3 hours to waking and going to sleep from weekends to weekdays, as if our brain would know, it's like, and going to bed at a consistent hour and exposing your eyes and your brain to outdoor light within the first 30 minutes of waking for at least 20 minutes. This simple pattern will entrain, and this is another concept that is very important, our suprachiasmatic nuclei could be trained and entrained. Our brain can be entrained, regulates the timing of cortisol, melatonin at night, body temperature, and indirectly hunger hormones like ghrelin and leptin. And of course, all of this profoundly impacts mood, cognitive status, attention status, impulsivity, compulsivity. So when this rhythm stabilizes, we see improvements in sleep continuity. So we sleep for more time. It's not our sleep, it doesn't get fragmented because our glucose is more stable too. We see mood regulation and cognitive clarity. So the lymphatic system, our brain is able to clear out toxic or metabolic waste at a more efficient pace. And once the brain has this predictability, clear signals from the environment, from its context of day-night structure, it becomes much easier to modify food choices, exercise, and even thought patterns that might become toxic or ruminated. So as a single time limited intervention, I would definitely put my money on sleep-wake plus morning light. So 24-hour concept is not only at night, a 24-hour concept as an intervention, as a keystone, I would say.
Oh,
I love this conversation so much and everything that you're sharing. And I want to be respectful of your time. We do have one signature question. And for you, we kind of tailor it to our guest. And for you, we wonder if you could tell a younger version of yourself something about maybe rhythms or addiction or mental health and healing, what would it be?
I have it's a very thoughtful question. I mean, it's profound because many things that if you've grown up in your best hope to be wiser than when I was 15 or 20. I'm also 42, so I think we are very young. And I would tell that I will try to understand my personality better, which is knowing thyself, the Oracle of Delphi phrase, trying to understand myself, being less harsh on myself, but also, that sensitivity is not a defect. It's a sign to how your nervous system responds to its environment. And when, your stress system is aligned to what you're going through, what you expose voluntarily or involuntarily to, also all of these aspects of not exaggerating with the capacity to recover after no sleeping at night, having those very harsh weekends on my body. I know that it's kind of like a common. I wouldn't say I would normal as something that is very usual, but the excess alcohol during those years, not sleeping at night, being very harsh on my body in regards to physical exercise, playing sports. I probably would not sleep at night or sleep very little, and then go to a tennis match or a soccer match earlier in the afternoon without having a tight recovery. So I have a couple of injuries. I think that as a consequence of that. But I would say that I would tell, or I will teach my younger self to protect the basic rhythms early, because if you start early, you can prevent. This is hardcore prevention we are speaking here. It's not something like cosmetic. It's something very profound. Metabolic interventions in psychiatry is not alternative medicine. It should have never been left out of the plate. It should be in conversation. It should be spoken more. These are not wellness accessories. They are the core architecture of our mental health. And I'm very happy to see that there's a flourishing of the field. There's more resources being poured in. You can't compare it to what goes with Ozempic or other drugs or Alzheimer's drugs. But with a lot of effort, there's a technology also help us connect worldwide, and there's a very strong groups of professionals working from different angles, and it's also helping to iteratively building a life with our brains from young, preventing a lot of damage, and promoting a body that we can inhabit without being in constant emergency mode. Because some of the things that we do to our bodies in our 20s, we carry for the rest of our lives. So even though our bodies are noble, we can recover. We are highly plastic, but if we don't do the damage, that's the best. Do not intox is the best detox.
Oh, I love your answer so much. It's so respectful, of the fact that this isn't about biohacking our way into like longevity. This is about quality and how do we get that quality of life. And you're right. If we're not injuring it in some way to begin with, we don't have to work on the recovery aspect or work so hard, right, to not be in emergency later on. So whatever we can do now to take care of ourselves and really pay attention to those rhythms and honor like our sleep needs and getting off of those. I mean, like you said, like if the grid went down and the insomnia took care of itself and we weren't on those screens, how much would heal. And I just so appreciate your time today. Thank you so very much. I've got goosebumps. So thank you again. We appreciate you. And we hope to be able to have you back again in the future.
Well, thank you very much for your kind words, both you, Molly, and Clarissa. I felt very comfortable during our conversation. It is not a mark that what you're saying is constructive or important, but I just wanted to convey you how I felt during our conversation. And I hope it's, as I said, constructive, and it fits some thoughts. It's a little bit of some food for thought.
Yep. Plant the seeds, right? That's what we're here to do.
Totally.
Exactly. Thank you very much.
Thanks for joining us this week on Food Junkies Recovery from Food Addiction. Make sure to join our Facebook group, Sugar Free for Life Support Group. I'm Sweet Enough. Molly and Clarissa are food addiction professionals who offer one-to-one counseling and group coaching through Sweet Sobriety. Please subscribe to our show so you never miss an episode. While you're at it, if you found value in today's episode, we'd appreciate you leaving us a review on your favorite platform. Your feedback helps grow our show and allows us to reach others who need to hear this message of recovery. Don't forget to pick up a copy of Dr. Tarman's book, Food Junkies. And as Vera always says, the power is ours.